got to start with the user and really look at that user. Don't just ask them what their problem is, because typically they'll tell you what already exists. What you have to do is study that user like an anthropologist would study a new tribe, and really try and figure out what does that world look like. So we'll do a few things to get us going on that path. Now, ultimately, there's three things that have to come together for a viable startup. You've got to find something that's very desirable to the user. That's a human factor issue. What really matters to that person and in what context does it really matter? And they've got to be in pain. Otherwise, there's thousands of other options for spending time and money than you're proposing. It's got to be feasible, and I'm not going to talk much about that. But it has to be feasible. You've got to have some solution. And today with our software and our very cheap hardware, it's possible to make all kinds of wonderful solutions very cheaply. The hard thing is really matching it to something someone really needs. And finally, it's got to be viable. We've got to work out that it is really a viable business. You can have great needs and viable solutions, but they can't afford to pay. Or there's not a way that we can deliver it. I often have students come up with all kinds of ideas for beating Apple or Samsung in iPads and phones. They may be great ideas, but there's almost never going to be a viability around that if you're going head-to-head with an Apple or a Samsung or any huge incumbent. So you've got to have a viable business model. But the place to start with design thinking is start with the user. Start with someone who's got a problem. And try and push aside for a bit, at least, your concern with viability and feasibility. Now, here's an example of how our mind works. When an airline looks at how can they compete more effectively with our customers, this is more or less their point of view. This is what they deliver. They deliver an experience on the plane. They also, of course, deliver ticketing experiences and so on, but mostly that's out of their control, what happens in the airport. And this is what they focus on. And pretty much we vote, because we don't have great options, we vote on price. So we have this weird thing of seats getting smaller while American derrieres are steadily getting much bigger. So it's strange. It's hard to make another vote. We look at this where our mind is looking at this particular problem. Someone's looking at his laptop, so we might not even think about an airline. We might think about how do we put a screen on that laptop. But really what we have to do when we're doing design thinking is look at the whole journey map. Now if we start thinking about international travel, business travel, let's say that's our customer. Well, there's a whole lot of things before and after when we fly. We have to, well, there's things before we drive. We've got to figure out our itinerary, where we're going. By the way, this new Apple Maps, don't use that. I've just uploaded to that, and I found something interesting. Boise's quite good. Apple Maps on Boise is quite good. Apple Maps in Orange County, where my oldest son lives, is very good. Where my dad lives in England, Pinnington, it does not exist. And if I went a drive-by-drive direction to his address, it would take me into a different town. And people are Googling, or of course they're Googling, all over the place and posting, particularly from overseas, some of the awful things Apple Maps is doing. But we might use, before we go anywhere, we might be using internet resources or a travel agent or someone to help plan this trip. But then we go to drive, and Boise, we're spoiled. We drive 15 minutes, we're at the airport. Washington, D.C., that's going to be 45 minutes. London to Heathrow from downtown, you better allow an hour and a half. So you've got a lot of activity before you're at the airport. Heathrow, now at London, is advising 3 hours before the flight that you should arrive. You're going to queue, you're going to wait, you're going to queue, you're going to wait. You're going to fly, you're going to wait, you're going to rent a vehicle, you're going to drive, hopefully find your destination. So there's a whole set of opportunities if we're trying to innovate in this business that are much, much bigger than our first point of view. And we've got to find a high leverage alternative. let's brainstorm some. What might an airline, would limit it to an airline now? If they're trying to innovate new value, and we have, when we do a journey map, we call this, and we look at experiences, we often put pictures of users up and user quotes. It wouldn't take long to find all kinds of grief going through that journey map. Not a good experience for most people. A lot of stress. Well, they have only got limited options in airline. They buy the same planes. They fly from the same airports, more or less. They don't usually control customs. But there are some options. One airline, a subset of British Air, actually did something very clever. They flew out of the City of London airport, which is downtown. Now it's got a tiny little runway, but it's very close to the financial district. And you can't fly to New York from the City of London, but you can fly to Shannon Island. And Shannon Island has a deal with the US Customs that people can go through US Customs in Shannon Island. So they fly a small plane to Shannon Island. People go through customs where there are no lines, no queues, just custom officials. They then get back on the plane that's been refueled. It flies to New York, and they get off at LaGuardia and don't have to go through customs. It's brilliant. Virgin Airlines, competing with the great monster British Air. Weird name for an airline, if you think about it, Virgin Airlines. Wouldn't you rather have an airline that's been around the block a few times than a Virgin? But they focus on trying to give fantastic experience for their business class travelers, upper class they call it, typically English, and in a clubhouse. So they've got snooker, billiard tables, they've got a great bar, they've got even pods you can go in to have a sleep. And if you land in London, they've got, if you don't rush through the customs, they've got showers and a breakfast to have there. So they've kind of figured out, what can we do for that 2 to 3 hour wait where we've got people prisoners? If we can make that a really good experience, that's far cheaper than replicating that on the plane itself. And yet it adds a lot of value. So mostly it's the methodology I'm encouraging. Think of, there are thousands of tools in design thinking, but one that's really helpful is to do a journey map. Find that user you're interested in and do a day in the life, a month in the life, over time of that person. What sequence of activities do they go through? Now I'll give another example. This is from the Stanford Design School, which is staffed by a lot of people from IDEO. And they've got a fantastic program where they teach graduate students design thinking. And those students come from business, from engineering, from architecture, from all over. They have no classrooms that look like normal classrooms. Everything is learned through doing projects. And they do projects that students are passionate about. Now this is in Palo Alto, California. You think, well, they're all passionate about making fortunes. Well, kind of, but they also, right now, have got a huge amount of social passion. And they have a lot of projects that look at third world challenges. So this is a field in sub-Saharan Africa. And they know the problem. The problem is there's a pitiful yield out of farming in this region. And the farmers are so poor that they're pulling their kids out of school when they're 13, 14 to work on the farm. And it's sub-subsistence farming, not even subsistence. So they're trying to figure out, what can we do? This is not a new question. We've poured billions of dollars in aid in that direction. And typically we end up saying, you buy our seed, you buy our Caterpillars, you buy our John Deere, we throw our technology at them. Well, when you look at a problem like this, from a design thinking point of view, you've got to, let's do the same thing here that we did with the airline problem. So what do you think, how would we plot out a journey map for this farmer? What would be the sequence of things that we would want to know about? Any thoughts on that?
He wakes up in the morning.
Sorry?
He wakes up in the morning.
Yeah, he gets up in the morning, goes out to the field. Maybe we could have a crop sequence from, planting the seed, where do they lose it,